carrying caution, as he should have, after the incident by not stopping immediately. That jumps him from the 19 to the 20 to the 29, and I know that the guidelines are not mandatory, and you will follow. You will make your own decision, Judge. I've discussed with Nathan. I saw that he was screened for PA 511. Here, and I would ask that you consider placing him in county jail for the 12 months, and upon release, being ordered to complete a program, the boot camp program through the Department of Corrections, the SAI. This is a 90-day program followed by another 4 months of hard work and sweat and labor, and Nathan is willing to do whatever he can, Judge. I would ask that you consider doing that so Nathan can serve his time and we don't lose two people here. Mr. Weber can't come back. Nathan can, and he will. If Your Honor doesn't feel inclined to go that route, I discussed this with the assistant prosecuting attorney before we went on the record. There was no plea here. He pled straight up, asking for low end of the guidelines. But it's my understanding if there was a HIDA added today, he could be sentenced to prison with your ability to pull him back and still put him into this boot camp program because it would be conditioned through the HIDA. I know that Nathan would like to make a statement to you, Judge. I know that ordinarily you're not necessarily going to let a family member speak, but due to the gravity of the situation and everybody that's here for Nathan, I would ask that you allow his mother and father to speak, not both of them, but if his mother can address Your Honor, that would be sincerely appreciated by the family.
Mr. Hunt.
Your Honor, July 26, 2015 is obviously a day that both Nathan and the Weber family will never forget. And in speaking with the Weber family before we came out here this morning, we both had difficulty understanding or wrapping our minds around the fact that in 2015, shortly to be 2016, we still find ourselves in court in cases like this with all the information out there about drinking and driving and what the family's lives that it destroys. Is just incomprehensible that we still have people in today's society that drink and get behind the wheel. The decedent here obviously can't speak to you, Your Honor. Chuck Weber, as they like to call him, Chuck, is Mr. and Mrs. Weber's first son. And I wanted to take a minute or two to let you know a little bit about him.
How old was he? Because I tried to find that out and I hadn't seen it.
44.
Thank you, sir.
He's 44 years old. His father was in the Army. He was born in Fort Knox. And he was very close to the family. He's very close with his nephew and his niece and spent a lot of time with them. He spent a lot of time with his mom and dad. He was in the trucking industry. He was a manager, a regional manager, and he would go home at least once a month, sometimes twice a month, to stay with his family. And over the last several years, he had forged a bond. And actually, I draw a comparison of myself and my father, the relationship that we have, that we've become very tight lately. That's what Mr. Weber had indicated to me, is that Chuck and he had become very close. He loved to be free. He wasn't married. He didn't have any kids, but you wouldn't know that from the sense of how much time he spent with his niece and nephew. He loved them very much. Loved to ride his motorcycle. As defense counsel indicated, there's really no words to put in perspective what we're dealing with here today. Mr. Weber summed it up perfectly in back and said, dead is dead. But it goes beyond that, Your Honor. Mrs. Weber had a hard time when Mr. Weber was describing the facts, and I'm certainly not going to go through those facts of the case out of respect to Mrs. Weber, but I will say that this wasn't your typical, as Mr. Weber said, his son got hit, he bumped his head. He was dragged, and he died a gruesome death, and that's very unfortunate. They are very cognizant. When I say they are, I mean Mr. and Mrs. Weber are very cognizant of Mr. Heinz's age and that he's got his whole life before him. Mrs. Weber is Catholic, was raised Catholic. Mr. Weber is a Christian, or as he likes to say, he's Weberized. And they believe in forgiveness, and they have truly forgiven Nathan and want him to turn his life around. But at the end of the day, we still have a dead body. At the end of the day, Christmas is Friday. They never will be able to sit down at Christmas and eat with Chuck And certainly my heart goes out to the Heinz family that they lost a member of their family as well. But at some point when Nathan's able to get back out into society, he will be able to go home and share holidays with his family. Chuck won't be able to. Mr. Weber wanted to make sure that this court fashioned a sentence that made sure that his son's death meant something. They're very happy to hear, before we called the case, Ms. Johanna Delt, which is one of our best victim advocates in the Macomb County Prosecuting Office, whispered in my ear, and they said that they would love it if Mr. Heinz somehow got involved with MAD, which I know this honorable court is very familiar with. It's a very impressive organization. Defense counsel was right in that the guidelines are 29 to 57. I believe they are scored appropriately. I believe that the points assessed for the psychological damage to the family, because they're going to be living with this the rest of their day, rest of their lives, is appropriate. I believe the 5 points that was scored for the due cause and circumstance was appropriately scored as well. I explained the guideline range to him. I explained the recent case to them that said that basically you can basically stay within the guidelines, go above or go below. Mr. Weber wanted to make sure his main theme was that my son's death stood for something. I can't in good conscience, I know Mr. Friedman has a job to do to advocate on behalf of his client, but based on the nature of this crime, based on the nature of the fact that at the end of the day we have a dead body, I can't in good conscience stand up here and say that I agree with HIDA for Mr. Heinz. I know Mr. Heinz is going to live with this the rest of his life. I'm asking the court to fashion a sentence to stay within those guidelines of 29 to 57. Mr. Weber's death should mean something, and I know the way this court sentences, it will mean something. And I hope that when Mr. Heinz will never be able to put this behind him, nor will the Weber family. But I do believe, in speaking to Mr. Friedman, that at some point there will be some good that comes out of this, whether it be Mr. Heinz turning his life around, Mr. Heinz work with perhaps MAD or some other organizations, or perhaps speaking to kids so that they don't make this same error in judgment that he did. Certainly I'm not going to call it a mistake, because I know how this court feels about the word mistake. This wasn't a mistake. It was a conscious decision to drink and get behind the wheel, and that's why we're here today. That's what I want to make sure that this court doesn't lose sight of. Despite his young age, despite the fact that he had a medical condition, he drank, he got behind the wheel, and now Chuck Weber is dead. And I ask you to take that into consideration when you fashion your sentence, Your Honor.
Counsel, this diagnosis and this substance abuse assessment of the narcolepsy, how long did he know he had that?
It's an interesting question, Your Honor. Before the accident, he met with a physician, and the physician mentioned it in their meeting at the office that this was certainly a possibility. Nothing further occurred. The doctor didn't refer him out, and it wasn't until after this event occurred, Your Honor, that my client was speaking with his father, and his father, who was a physician himself, said, we need to look into this. And subsequent to the accident, the narcolepsy was diagnosed. Obviously, Your Honor, if that had something to do with this, it doesn't take away from the decision that Nathan made. And we've certainly not even brought it to Your Honor's attention, because we're not looking for an out. No matter how many people I've discussed this case with, when you hear a .14, you're generally not thinking passed out. I think it's a combination of perhaps narcolepsy exacerbated by the .14 and the fact that young Nathan was working 10, 12-hour days, and it all caught up to him.
And your client would like to tell me what?
He's prepared a statement he'd like to make, Your Honor, as well as if Your Honor allows his mother to speak.
No. I will entertain his comments, though.
Certainly.
Thank you, for Your Honor, for letting me speak. I just wanted to say first and foremost, again, and I know I can't say it enough, I'm sorry, the Webers. I'm so sorry. And you're right, you can't call it a mistake. It's a terrible decision, and I wake up every day just hoping that that's not what happened, that it's just this is all going to be done with, but that's not the case. The case is that this is my reality now, and this is something that I'm going to have to live with, just like they're going to have to live with. And my only hope is that I can share with other people and prevent more people making decisions like this, like I did, and just prevent some more senseless death. And that's it. Thank you, Your Honor.
As I sit here, and I'm nearing the end of my judicial career here as a circuit judge, getting really close. I drive to work every morning and I contemplate my cases that I've sat on, the experiences that I've had in life. I pray, I believe in God, I'm a Christian, and I look back and I say, well, why did I get to be chosen to sit here? And I think of all of the experiences that I've had in life, of all of the things that I've encountered in life, why do I end up with your case? Why does, and I can't speak religion, but why does my God put your case in front of me? And there are reasons why, I believe. I, arrested for drunk driving, have an idea of what that means. I nearly killing my mother in a drunk driving accident. I understand what you are going through. I genuinely do. Every day I am thankful that she didn't die because of my irresponsibility in my youth. I bring to this bench a certain degree of experience, things that if I grew up in a funeral home, I've seen death in every type of situation you might ever want to think of. Sitting here on the bench, as you're speaking, as your attorney's speaking, I'm reflecting on a very case that I'll never forget of two young men driving to the movies at 11:30 at night, two brothers involved in a drunk driving accident. The gentleman again had a type of medical condition that affected and compounded with his alcohol use that night, killed one of those sons. I still have visions of that young man and his parents sitting here in the courtroom, and I am affected, and I ask myself, why? I love driving a motorcycle. Have my cycle endorsement. I've had 3 motorcycles, but I've stopped for fear of this happening to me. Everybody says, be careful on that motorcycle, Mary. My brothers, who are funeral directors and embalmers, that encountered bodies that they would work on that came as a result of drunk drivers. Be careful on that motorcycle. I gave up motorcycling because of this very situation of being presented with something like this. So to move on aside, for the sake of the family, my fear of being on a motorcycle. So all these things come together to create a judge that has experienced every aspect of what goes on in this case. The drunk driving arrest, the serious injuries, the loss of life, seeing people dying at all ages from my youth on. And I try to focus on what is an appropriate sentence. But underneath all of it was your decision at the age of 21 to drink and drive. And if somehow we could create a movie, if somehow we could create a show to get people your age to recognize that, yes, this can happen to me. Yes, and your family apparently has experienced this type of death. Don't go out and do this behavior. Call your friend. We got Uber now. Call that, or is it Uber, whatever it's called. Call them. Let them drive you home. And you, by your own admission, has been smoking dope for how long? according to what I've read. What are you running from? What are you trying to escape from? Because that's why we drink. That's why I drink. And every day you wake up and I say, it's a new day, Mary. You can't go backwards. We can only go forward. We have to reflect on the past. We have to use the past as the fears and not to make the same mistakes again. That's where you're at with your life. And I remember the day that I was involved in my drunk driving accident. I remember what I went through. But the most serious thing and the most important thing that I remember is when I put my mother in a casket when she died at the age of 82, and the scar that I caused on her forehead was still there. And that causes me never, ever again to drink and or drive, especially under the influence of alcohol. And it's sad that we have to learn from those experiences and from those losses. But I am confident that the Lord gave me this job for a particular reason. For all of the experiences that I've had in my life, all of the preaching that I do that I know at times gets the attorneys angry because they want to get out of my courtroom. I feel a need to have to share my experiences in hopes of getting to someone like you to say that it has to stop today. And all of the people who I tried to save, who are killing themselves with the overdose of heroin, with the overdose of any other drug or alcohol that's killing them. To all the attorneys who get upset, oh well, too bad. You only got maybe another year dealing with me. But if I could save a life of which I hope now you wake up and you can save lives and use what I've experienced like I do sitting up here, sharing with everyone my mistakes, now it's your turn. It's your turn when you get out of prison, because that's where I'm going to have to put you, to get out and share your experiences and save other lives. To the family that lost their son, I am so sorry, because I understand that loss. To your family who will now lose a son for a few years as you are in prison, I'm sorry. For every action, there's a consequence. And this is certainly an unfortunate accident. But again, as Mr. Hunt said, it was a conscious decision on your part to go out, to get intoxicated, but more importantly, to get into that car and drive while under the influence of alcohol. So, I don't know if is it a good thing that you got me as a judge or not. I think it is, because for some reason my person I believe in put us together, put all of us in this courtroom together. I'm going to go along with the recommendation. There's nothing that will ever replace their son. Nothing that will bring him to the dinner table on Christmas Eve or Christmas Day. So I find this recommendation very appropriate, counsel, and I ask, do you want me to proceed, or would your client like for me to set the matter for trial?
One moment, Your Honor.
I accept the sentencing, Your Honor.
The policy of the state of Michigan favors individualized sentencing for every convicted defendant. The sentence must be tailored to fit particular circumstances of the case and the defendant. Tailoring the sentence to the offense and defendant, the court has gathered complete detailed information about the defendant. The court is satisfied with the reliability of the information received, satisfied that it is reasonably up to date, has determined it is competent as a sentencing consideration, and has resolved any challenges as to its accuracy in favor of the defendant. It's the sense of the court that you be incarcerated for a period of 29 months to 15 years in the custody of the Michigan Department of Corrections. The restitution amount that is owed is $10,900.11 to the victim's family. There's a $60 DNA test fee, which you must pay, as well as have a DNA test, a $68 state fee, a $130 Crime Victim Rights Service Fund fee. And counsel, you are retained.
That's correct,
In
Judge.
determining the sentence for this defendant, the court has considered the discipline or punishment of the wrongdoer, the protection of society, the potential for rehabilitation of the defendant, the deterring of others from committing